Hey guys, in this video, I want to show you how you can quickly use the Pro panel to make a selection for a sky and blend a blue hour shot with the star shot. So this is super easy in this case. We just hold down Shift and click on B under color masks, and we wind up with this blue channel mask here that we just need to refine very quickly. So we click refine, and then we just use this levels box here. So we just decrease the amount of shadows included. And then we're going to do the same thing for the midtones as well. And then we're going to increase the amount of highlights that are included here. So this is going to help us get kind of a rough mask that we're just going to refine just a little bit more here in a second, and I'm going to show you how. So I'm just eliminating things by making them black with the levels adjustment, and then including things by making them white. So let's include the highlights a little bit more, and then I'm going to click OK. And what's cool about this is a preview at this point. So Luminosity Mask and Color Masks are applied as previews. And then you can further refine them with a brush, for example. So if I paint an overlay blend mode, I can further refine this just by painting black. So I'm just excluding things by making them black. And then you can also exclude by painting white. So if I start painting with white here, an overlay blend mode, if you don't know, just helps to kind of refine a layer mask. You could use normal as well. So here we can even go further, and we could use something like the lasso tool and just select the remaining amount that we need to paint and just quickly hit fill with. And then by default, the foreground color comes up. So in this case, foreground color is white. So we'll just click OK, and that will fill this with white. And mind you, this is still just a preview. So this is pretty cool that we can work with the luminosity mask or a color mask preview and basically refine it before we even apply it. So let me do the same thing down here. Again, we can quickly just fill in areas. So we'll do background color so it's black in this case. And I'm going to do the same thing for this last little bits here. So if I just select these guys, I could also do this with a brush, mind you, painting at 100%, but this is just a shortcut basically. So I'm just going to select all this stuff here. And then just click fill with and background color for black and click OK. All right, so I'm going to hit the deselect button here. And now I'm just going to apply it as a mask. So I need to invert this mask because the selection was for the foreground. So if I just click invert, this flips the layer mask as you just saw. And now if you guys look closely, we have a very fine selection along this horizon. And we just completely masked out the sky from this blue hour high ISO shot and blended in the star shot at the shorter exposure below. And now we get this nice seamless blend that is perfectly refined at the edges. All right, so now that we blended the photos together and we have our stars blended back with our blue hour shot here, taken a little bit later, I'm going to show you the next steps that I would do basically to finish off this edit. So first and foremost, since we do have our foreground on a separate layer above the sky, anything that we do underneath this layer is only going to affect the sky. So first off, I want to add a cooling filter to the sky. So I'm going to go to Effects, to Color Effects, and I'm going to shift click on Photo Filter, which will give me a cooling filter. So that's going to make the sky a little bit bluer. So maybe I want to dial that back a little bit, maybe somewhere around 50%. And also there's some noise in the sky. So let's go ahead and address this real quick by going to our sky layer here and then going to filters, and then under correction, we're just going to click noise reduction. All right, so this gives us a preview of the noise reduction. You can just pan up to the sky if you want. And these are the default settings here, but you can definitely change them if you want. And I'm happy with this, so I'm just going to click OK, and it's going to apply the noise reduction to this layer. All right, so if we do a before and after, you can see we just took away just a little bit of that noise there, so I'm happy with that. So now we can continue to edit these two pieces separately, so the sky and the foreground, or we could stamp visible and move forward just editing the photo as if it's one photo. So that's what I'm going to do at this point. I'm just going to go ahead and click Stamp Up. And what Stamp Up does is it merges visible. So this is your typical merge visible shortcut right here. And it just puts everything that's visible together onto one single layer. So now we can edit this photo as if it's one photo. Alternatively, you could just flatten the image if you wanted to at this point by holding down Shift and hovering over Merge. And this would flatten all the layers into one. But I like to keep my layers so that I can go back and make changes down the line if I need to. All right, so something that I always do with my images, as you guys probably know, is Orton and a high pass sharpening. So There are separate buttons for them, Orton here and high pass sharpening here, but I've combined them in the Orton Sharp as one action, so you can click that if you want to run both. So you get the option to change these settings here if you want. These are the settings that I use, so this is where it's set for default. But maybe you might want to apply this effect differently to different photos, so there is the option here to change it up if you want, and basically change whether this is a bright or a dark Orton effect. So we'll just click OK now. I'm happy with this. Now it's going to run the sharpening action, and 2.8 is the radius by default for high pass. I find that works really well, so this is what I always use. And now zooming in here, you can see we have the high pass and we have the Orton effect. So if I turn that off and on, you can see we add a nice dreamy glow to the image, but also some sharpness. So these are two separate layers. I can just turn this opacity down for the sharpening a little bit if I think the sharpening is a little too strong. And I could turn the strength of the Orton down or up, depending on how strong I want it. So I'm going to turn it up a little bit. And now if I turn that off and on, you can see we've added a nice kind of dreaminess to the photo here. And I think that this works really well for night shots, because night shots usually don't have a ton of contrast and sharpness because you're not usually shooting at a high aperture, right? So they're usually going to be a little bit kind of dreamier and softer. All right, so next up I want to add some star glow. So I'm going to go to effects, and then under astrophotography, I'm going to click star glow. And I'm going to select my brush, and it's set to white so that I can paint on this inverted layer mask and paint this effect in. And I'm just going to zoom in, and I'm only going to apply this on the biggest stars. So I'm going to change my opacity to 100, and I'll keep my flow at 20. And I'm just going to make the brush about as big as the actual star. So starting here, and I'm going to click and then expand the bracket keys as I go. So I'm just going to keep clicking and expanding the brush as I go. And this is going to add a nice little bit of glow to the stars here. So I'm just going to apply this on the brightest stars. So we'll go with this guy as well. And then maybe some of these smaller stars over here. And maybe just a couple of these guys up here, and I'll be done. And I'm kind of moving quickly here. You guys can definitely take your time and make these a little bit more refined. All right, so let me zoom back out so you can see that there. So this zooming back out, this looks really strong, right? So if I turn that off and on, you can see that does look too strong. So all I need to do is just reduce the opacity of this star glow layer here, and you can see this looks a lot better already. So one of my favorite things to do is to add a vignette to kind of tie the focus towards the middle where this amazing hot spring is and the mountain. So I could just do a vignette, and this will quickly add a vignette for me, your typical oval shaped vignette. And I could adjust the opacity of this maybe to be a little less strong. Or I can use my custom vignette. So let me delete this. So to make a custom vignette, you're just going to use a selection tool like the lasso tool, or you could even use like the patch tool if you want. And you're just going to draw the shape of the vignette you want. So maybe we want to exclude this river altogether. Then I'm just going to draw this custom shape and then click custom vignette here. And then by default, it comes up at 400 radius, which is fine in most cases, I think. But if you want this more feathered, you're going to increase this number, and less feathered, you're going to decrease the number. So I'll click OK, and then if I turn this off and on, you can see that I've added a custom shaped vignette, basically from what I just drew on the screen. And by default, it comes at 40% opacity, so we can increase this if we want it stronger, and that's obviously way too strong, or we can decrease it. So I'm going to put it to something like 25%. I think that looks good there. And another filter that I always use in my edits is Lux. So this is the closest thing that I've found to the Lux filter in Instagram, but this is applying it in Photoshop, so this is really nice. It just adds a nice punch to the image here, as you can see. And we can also do some stuff with some luminosity masks. So maybe I want to add some contrast specifically here to these mountains. So let me go back to my luminosity mask, and I'm just going to grab, let's try darks 3 mask and then see what this selects for us. So you can see that in white is what it's selecting. So this is selecting mostly the dark. So maybe we need to work in the midtones here. So let's try midtones 3. But you can see it's affecting a little bit more than just the mountains. So let's try midtones 2. So something that's pretty cool is you can actually subtract masks from each other or add them together. So in this case, if we think that this is including too much of the highlights, we can actually just subtract a lights mask. Let's do lights 1. It's going to subtract the most highlights here. So I'm just going to hold down Option, and this is Alt on a PC, and then click on lights 1, and it's going to subtract the lights 1 from this Luminosity Mask preview, and now you can see that it's affecting just mainly the mountains and less of the sky. But let's refine it just a little bit further and click Refine here to bring up our dialog box. And I just want to target these mountains again, like I said. So I'm just going to try and get some of the other tones out by taking away some of the shadows. And we could take out the highlights on the bottom box here, for example. So I'm going to click OK. And then this time I'm going to export this as a curves layer. So now this is going to export that luminosity mask as a curves layer. And now basically I'm going to show you the mask now. Now whatever I do with this curves layer is going to only be shown through this layer mask or revealed through the white, right? So now I can add some contrast, and you can see it's only affecting the midtones here and not so much the shadows or the highlights. And then through this mask here, you can see I've just added some nice contrast back in the image. All right, so I typically like to stamp up every now and then, so I'm just going to stamp visible one more time. And this is, again, going to combine everything that's visible as one single layer, so we still have one layer. Now I'm going to open up Camera Raw, which you can do right here from Quick Actions. And I'm going to make a couple adjustments using a graduated filter. I'm just going to add a little bit more contrast to the top half only. And I'm going to bring the highlights down just a touch as well. And maybe I want to add some contrast to the overall image and maybe brighten up the shadows just a little bit. This is looking really nice. Maybe I want to make some adjustments to the blue here. I could do that in Camera Raw, or I can make a blues mask, selecting a color mask like so. And then I can export that as a hue and saturation or a different type of color balance or selective color layer or something like that if I want to make adjustments. So I'm going to make a hue and saturation. And now you can see that if I adjust the hue, it's only going to affect the blues because I'm selectively revealing this hue and saturation layer through a blue color mask. All right, so I just want to make it a little bit more purple toned and kind of less cyan. And I think that this looks really nice here. So if I go to the bottom here and then I select my background layer, you can see this is where we started, a blue hour shot. Blended in the stars and then added some really nice effects. So you could continue to edit. At this point, I'm happy with this, so I would just save this for web and save it as a Photoshop file and all that good stuff as well. So I'm just going to select my folder that I want them to go to here. So this is going to be my pictures, and I'm going to name this Mammoth Lakes. And I just want to save this for web, so I'm going to save this for at 2400 on the tall end here with no sharpening, but you can apply sharpening if you want. And I've applied sharpening in the actual image, so I'm not going to add any more, but I want to save it at 100% quality as a JPEG for web to this folder with this name. So I'll just click JPEG here. Also, you can add your watermark before you do this as well if you want to. So now this image is going to be saved directly to this folder, and we can email or airdrop it to ourselves and then post it directly on social media. And that's pretty much it, guys. At this point, like I said, I would also save it as a PSD or a PSB so that I have the actual file with layers. So if I ever need to go back and make changes in the future or tweak some stuff, I have the full working file saved.